Hey, welcome to another episode of Becoming a TechnoWizard. So I had a really great call meeting for the Flatiron bootcamp thing during the phase 5. They have us meet with people in the industry, so we actually get to talk to them, see how real designers work, and what their life is like, what their job is like, their company, and all that stuff. And this person worked as his job was an immersive experience designer. So he got to work with virtual reality, augmented reality, and all that, mixed reality, stuff like that. So really had a great meeting with him. Got to learn a lot about where the field is now, how fast it's growing, and how designers are really being used in this space. Even though it's still kind of niche, it's still not really mainstream. It's growing super fast. So this is a pretty good time to start getting into this field because it's green field. It's a blue ocean, whatever you want to call it. It's open field. You can pretty much create new principles and new ways of working through this field. So a couple things they talked about was like this one idea called brown boxing, where this company Shell Games used this method to develop their game. I expect you to die. It's a virtual reality game. It's kind of like an escape room game type of thing. And they use brown boxing to like kind of set up what the game would be like. So they put on like cardboard stuff. Just bought like cheap construction paper, cardboard, all that stuff, and just made their scene, like their game level, physically. So you can also call it physical prototyping, and it allows you to test certain things out without having to spend all that time and money and resources building it out and with 3D modeling, or with virtual reality tools like Unity and Unreal and stuff like that. So I saw that. I thought that was really cool. I never really heard about that, and I'm mad I never really thought about that myself, to like prototype something through physical props like cardboard, like something simple like that. Like in my head, whenever I prototype something, not even prototype it, but whenever I realized that I can't really code it, or it take me too long to code it out. So in my head, I would try to place everything. I have a pretty good like spatial kind of map in my head, so it works most of the time. But this is such a better tool because you can actually prototype it. You can test it with other users, with actual people, not just keep it in your head. And whenever you put something into the world, you find things that you never really would have seen if it was stuck in your head. So it's really cool to see that they use just things like that in their day to day. He's talked about a lot of other stuff, but one thing that I really wanted to talk about was he gave me this idea. He was like, because my instructor, he told him, I've worked at a virtual reality arcade. So he was like, how would I use this experience to kind of stand out in this field? Because even though this field is very new, it is not really super friendly to junior designers, to people who are new to UX design or pretty much any field. Because anytime you try to get into a new field, they're like, oh, you need 10 years of experience, right? And it's usually far more technical. So, and I knew that too, because I spoke to other people who are getting into this field, and they themselves, the only reason they got in is because they were technical, like they were using 3D modeling and design and Unity, like game designers and stuff like that, and they transferred that over to virtual reality and augmented reality. But a good point he made was that I can just make like podcasts and blogs talking about what I learned in my experience at a virtual reality arcade as a UX designer. So like here's 5 things I learned as a here's 5 things I learned about design, working in a virtual reality arcade, or here's how to design a virtual reality arcade with UX design principles, or something like that. Try to cross what I'm learning as a UX designer with those years of experiences that I have actually seeing people use virtual reality and testing out tons and tons and tons of virtual reality games. So that idea like really blew my mind. I'm like, oh, it's so simple. Like, why haven't I thought about this before? Like, I knew I could, if I got in an interview, I could talk about, hey, this is how, I learned, like, all these experiences. I was always thinking about using my experiences as a virtual reality arcade, to transfer that over to design, because it's very user centric. It's very, you know, it pretty much follows a lot of the human-centered design kind of thought processes, where you want to design something that is really for a specific, for users. And when you're designing, a virtual reality experience, or when you're testing it or anything like that, you have to think about it in terms of what the user, is going to do. Like, you can't build a virtual reality experience, not a good one, without actually having users try it out, and thinking about how people will move through your environment. So I was gonna, bring all that into my interviews, but for some reason it just never occurred to me to actually create blogs and stuff like that talking about it right now, like talking about, the lessons and insights I learned and how to transfer that over. So, because it's on my mind, I wanted to go ahead and spend, use this time to try to think that through. All right. So when I do make this blog, what kind of things would I put in that blog? So I've been working at this arcade for almost 3 years now, like since 2017 August. So yeah, almost exactly 3 years. And even before that, I was fortunate enough to have to be exposed to virtual reality since 2015, I think it was. I tried the HoloLens when it was the early HoloLens. I've tried, the Oculus, mixed reality headsets. Well, it's not really mixed reality, but Microsoft's headset basically is not much different than the other ones, but they use a different kind of tracking. But I tried, HTC Vive, Vive Pro. I haven't tried the Index yet, but I tried the controllers. So I tried a lot of different hardware, and Google Cardboard, Gear VR, all that stuff. Right? I tried a lot of different hardware. I've tried even like some of the more immersive experiences, like a backpack experience. Not fully, like I haven't been able to go to the Void yet. Can't afford that. They're expensive. But I had like my own job. We had a backpack and was trying that out. I've set these up a million times. Troubleshooting and all this stuff. So, my experience with virtual reality is pretty in depth. And even before then, I used to read about virtual reality and all these different web fictions. Like I think I talked about it in a couple of episodes, but the first time I really learned about virtual reality was from this book called Epic. It was a whole series, Epic Edda Saga. This is a really amazing, or Epic Saga Edda? I don't know. But it was a really amazing series set in like far future, where these people were living in a simulation, and they didn't know it. Like, they thought it was like reality, right? And but they were living. Oh no! What? No. It was. I don't think they were in a simulation. I gotta read that book again, because it kind of gets a little, not confusing, but very complex. But let me see. How did it start? Oh yeah, so it wasn't a far future, and they were in a planet, they weren't on Earth. They were in a whole other planet, other side of the galaxy or something like that. And they were playing, most of their life revolved around playing, these virtual reality games and simulations and stuff like that. And they had this really interesting aspect of it, to where the AI within the game was like so advanced that the AI seemed real, right? Like the villain specifically, they had this really big villain who somehow gained consciousness almost. So the villain of the game knew he was in a game, and his like big kind of motivation or whatever was to get out of the game. So he started hacking around, and it was messing with the AI, and it turns out the things that were running the simulation are AI themselves, and they were situated on Earth. And, most of the people on Earth were like comatose almost. Like, Earth was basically like a post-apocalyptic place. Most people lived in the simulation. They never woke up. It was like almost like the Matrix. They never woke up. They always were in the simulation. That was their reality. And so that whole series really got me interested in this idea of virtual reality. And then from there, I read stuff like Legendary Moonlight Saga, Sword Art Online, Arc, all these different, most of them were Eastern kind of ideas of VR MMORPGs, virtual reality MMOs and stuff like that. And so I've been deep into this for a long time. So when Oculus came out, I was like, oh, it's time to get in there. This is about to be the future. So yeah, I'm really coming from this from a in-depth perspective. So I definitely want to use all of that in this, like, in my blogs, and when I start talking about what I learned as a designer in this field. So some of those lessons I learned, and the reason why I talked about reading all these books is because a lot of that comes into play when you're in my job, because my first major job in this arcade was to find new games, right? Find new games that we could put in our that we can license and put in our library to encourage people to come and stuff like that. And it was really hard in the early days of 2017, 2018, because there were not very many VR games. It was like VR was big, like it had a whole little bubble, but it wasn't that big, right? And people were still like looking at it as if it was, and every month you had this whole VR is dying, right? So that was very annoying, and it was very difficult to find games. So my job was like reaching out to all these game developers and testing their game out and seeing, hey, should we put this in our arcade? We couldn't just put any game, because we had to make sure it was quality experience. Like it had to be something simple, easy to pick up, but it couldn't be like boring, right? It had to be something that is exciting to play. And so when I'm testing out all these games, I'm thinking about it from the perspective of a user, like that human-centered design. I'm thinking, okay, is this what knowledge do you have to play this game? Like, what is your technical expertise do you have to play this game? And unfortunately, a lot of the early stages of VR, it was so wild. Like there weren't very many principles of what makes a good VR game. And so people were like moving the camera around. That's the worst thing you could do in VR. Like it's like, imagine like if you're watching this video, I'm moving around like this and this. It's probably already annoying to people that I'm walking around with my phone in my hand, because it's shaky a little bit, and it makes it uneasy. So imagine you're in a VR game. You have something in your head, so all you can see is whatever is in this screen, and now that screen is just moving, and your head is not moving. So that's why it's a terrible thing to have forced camera movements in VR. So that's one of the major things we look for. And another one was how easy it was to learn the game, because VR is an interesting platform where when you put on this helmet, when you put on this gear, you're inside the world. You're in a totally different world. And so when you interact with things, you have your controllers, right? When you interact with things, for a lot of people, their brain does one of two things. One, it instantly goes into cognitive overload because they put on a helmet and all of a sudden they're in a new environment, and so your brain is like, what's going on, and people are separating this. People are thinking either, hey, this is a game, and I have to just figure out the controls to the game, or B, or two, whatever. This is a different experience. Like, it's not like they think it is real, but they don't. There's certain people that don't play games, and they're seeing it as a whole other experience, right? Somebody's calling me. That's an unfamiliar number. So now when I look back at this thing, this ease of use as a designer, I'm thinking about it in terms of when you're designing a page, you want to guide people's eye, right? You want to guide people to what they're supposed to do on their page. Like, the whole thing of a designer is, don't make me think. Like, if you have to think about what you have to do in order to accomplish your task, you're not going to enjoy the experience. You're going to just go to another website, or you're going to, if it's critical thing that you have to accomplish on this website, you're going to get frustrated. That's why people get frustrated on websites, because they just want to accomplish their task. And if the design of the website is fighting them, is too complicated for them to understand, then that is where the pain comes in, because they just want to do this one thing, but there's all these things going on the website, or they can't find what they're looking for and stuff like that. it's a very similar in VR, but it's 10 fold, because not only are you looking at the screen now the entire environment around you is artificial. So now you have to figure out where in the environment should your attention be going. You have to figure out, if you put a call to action in a virtual reality experience, it can't be like off to the right, in your center of views right here, right? It's right in front of you. So you have to you have to draw people's attention to the most important aspects of that experience. You can't make an experience where everything is happening all around you, unless it is an experience where you're supposed to explore, right? But even then, you if you want people to explore, you have to give people guidance to explore. You have to design triggers, right? So a good example of this is in my arcade's launcher, right? We have a game launcher to where you put on a headset and you're in a spaceship, and then you have to press a button to bring up your game menu, right? Unfortunately, even though the spaceship is really cool, it's a cool experience, and people can walk around and see Earth from space, and they're like, whoa, this is amazing, right? But for most people, they're new to VR, so one, they don't realize what they can do. That's another thing with design. You have to empower people. You have to educate people on what they can do on your website, in your experience. And in virtual reality, it's doubly important, because the vast majority of people have never played VR, don't even really know what it is, and so you have to tell people, hey, this is your movement. You can move. Like, people can put on the helmet and they don't realize that they can actually now move their feet and be in a different location, or they can press a button and teleport to a different location. And people, when you show them they can teleport, they're like, whoa, right? Because you don't teleport in real life. And on the website, when you're in the website, you click a button and it's going to bring you to a different page. It's like, you don't just teleport on a website. You press a button and something happens. But people don't realize that in virtual reality. So you have to design the experience such that people are aware of what's going on around them. Some other things there is, once again, kind of guiding people's eye. You have to use sound. Sound is super important in virtual reality, because if something is happening behind you, if you have like an important scene or important thing you want to show the user, the person in there, you have to make them look at that thing. So another good example, in our arcade, we have in the spaceship, in our game launcher, which we call the spaceship or whatever, we have a little interactive things that kind of teach people that, hey, VR is interactive. You can go up to something and press a button. But this is one part where you press a button and it launches a spaceship. But the spaceship is like 30, 40 feet away, right? And you have to kind of look up. Like, the button is down here and the spaceship is up further, down. And so, when we first designed it, people didn't realize what was happening, right? You press the button and it's like, what happened? And so our game designer, he had to put in like a huge spatial effect and a sound, to make it to tell the user that something was happening. So you press the button and say woo woo woo, right? And it was like the sound of the spaceship charging up. And so the spaceship then, like the back of the spaceship would charge up, smoke will come out and everything, and it was just shoom, it will shoot off. And so now people realize, hey, when you press the button, boom, 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 and they look up, it's like, where's that sound coming from? You see a giant, light effect. I'm moving my hand. You see a giant light effect, and that spaceship just boom, zooms out. And so, that's why audio is so important. We had a number of things where this happened, like where we had a feature, still do have a feature where you can change the planets. So when you start out in the spaceship, you're over the Earth, right? But you can grab a planet and put it on like a holodeck type of thing, and it changes the entire background. So it changes to Mars or the Moon or Jupiter or whatever. But again, people, when we first had the effect, you just put the planet in, and people didn't realize that the background changed. And so we had to put a huge like psychedelic effect to everything. Like it's like a whole kaleidoscope of colors happens all around you. You can't not see it. Like you can't miss it, and it makes people look around, and then the background changes. And they're like, oh, the background changed. And so sometimes people still don't realize like why the background changed, but most people realize that, hey, this triggered that. So that's another thing. You have to draw people's attention to the action going on, to the scene, and I got a pimple or something, I don't know. But and you have to give affordance to a thing that can be interacted with. That's another huge thing, is interaction. So in virtual reality, there are so many things that you can do, and you have to decide, what you want to be interactive. And because it's a virtual reality experience, you usually want everything to be interactive. Because if it's not, at least for a game setting, if it's not interactive, then it kind of breaks the immersion, right? You go to pick up something, an object that looks like you can pick it up, and you can't. It's just your hand just goes through it, and you're like, this is fake, it's lame. So that's why so many games nowadays, like Half-Life Alyx and Boneworks, are so revolutionary, because everything is interactive. Like everything is physics. You can pick something up, throw it, and it does damage. This is a zombie game. One of Arizona Sunshine is one of the first real zombie games. One of the most popular zombie games, especially for arcades. And it's a really, really good game. However, they have a problem where they have a ton of interactive objects. Like you open up a car, you can actually open up a car door, right? And then you grab like stuff in the trunk of the car, like a rubber ducky, it's like tape and all this stuff. But the objects don't do anything. You can't craft anything. You can't throw it at zombies. It doesn't do any damage. And so people all the time, it happens almost every single time, they pick up this tape, they pick up like a lighter or something, like, oh, can I put these together? Can I make a flamethrower? Nope. It's uninteractive. Can I throw it at a zombie? Nope, it doesn't do anything. So that's a huge letdown to people, and it's like it kind of breaks their immersion some more. But the game is so fun that people don't really care after a while. They just get back to shooting. But it's still a lost kind of opportunity. That's why the new zombie game that's super big nowadays is Saints and Sinners. Walking Dead, I think it's a Walking Dead game. Yeah, Saints and Sinners. And that game, like, everything is interactive. You can grab an object and hit a zombie up the head with it. You have a bottle, you can break the bottle over the zombie's head, and it does damage. You can then, when the bottle breaks, it's jagged, and then you can stab them with the freaking bottle. And so now that is super interactive, and users, people that's playing this game, are super immersed into the world now. Because now you can pick up objects. If you run out of ammo, you just grab an object, grab a knife, and just stab them and stuff like that. And that adds a lot to the immersion factor of the world. And so when we think about this in terms of a designer standpoint, in terms of what you can apply to other experiences, you want to. It goes back to the idea of minimalism, of don't have anything in your scene that does not have a use, right? And in virtual reality, it's super important, because if something has a use, if something does not have a use and you have it there and you have it interactive, well, it's a twofold problem. One, if you have something there that's visible but it's not interactive, it becomes kind of part of the background. Either it breaks the immersion because your hand just flies through it, or it becomes part of the random background. And now you're gonna have a difficult time later on saying, hey, if you have you have to find a certain object on this table, right? Why would people go through the entire table? Why would people go through all these different items if they know that most items are not interactive? Now you have to make it glowing or something like that. You have to do something special to draw people's attention to that item, and again, it breaks immersion. Or number two, if it is interactive, then you have if it's interactive but not like collidable, like not really physics based, like you could pick it up but you can't do anything with it, then it breaks immersion, because like what's the point, right? And that goes back to regular design, where when you're making a website, you don't want to have too many elements that have no use. Like if an element has no use, take it out, because that just draws people's attention to something that does not do anything of import. It's not important, right? And it just introduces more visual clutter, more clutter. You don't want that. So yeah, I learned that a lot, and through these virtual reality experiences. So it's really cool to think about it now that I learned a lot more about design. So when I create this blog, I want to draw parallels to design or typical like 2D design and 3D design, and also I want to be able to apply it to the real world. Like, you know, um, if you're creating virtual reality experiences, I want to see what might be transferable to augmented reality or to spatial computing, or just just designing websites in a different way, right? So, for instance, like the thing with immersive experiences, with the experience being all around you, what if we design websites where it's more than just a 2D page directly in front of you? What if you can move around that web page more fluidly? What if the navigation was more interesting than just infinite scrolling or clicking on a nav bar, right? What if you can maybe, I don't know, click this one part and you teleport to a new web page or something like that? Or what if you have portals, like your website was like an actual portal, like a physical portal, so you can see a preview of what's in the second page, but from the first page, you can see a preview of what's in every page. So that way, maybe you don't want to go to that page. You just want to see what might be there. You can just peek through the door, and you can see what might be in the other page. I don't know. It's just interesting ways to kind of redesign, their internet, because we're at a stage right now where the internet is finally kind of maturing more. Before, uh, even though sometimes it feels like we have the internet forever. It hasn't been that long. It's been barely 20 years since the internet has been like mainstream. Yeah, the internet, like in 2000, like I didn't get really into the internet until like 2012, 2000, maybe 2009, 2010. I was in like high school though when I really started to browse the internet, and I think for most people it will probably be a little bit earlier, maybe the early 2000s. But it's barely been 20 years since most people really had access to the internet. Um, yes, we have a current generation that only knows the internet, but for the vast majority of adults, the internet is still very new. It's still very they're still learning how to use it, and so I think it will benefit a lot to use more virtual reality principles and designing the regular web as well, because virtual reality forces you to rethink how we design, and to design things from a more realistic standpoint. Because when you design a virtual reality game, you have to think about people's normal expectations for objects and for interaction and for all these things. And so, for instance, if you see a plant or something, in a virtual reality experience, that's a plant. Maybe you can water it, maybe you can, burn it, maybe you can move it or something like that. But when you see a plant on a website, it's just a picture. It's just a plant. There's no interaction. There's no, you don't really think about, hey, maybe I can do something with this. No, it's usually just a picture or something like that, right? So there are a number of things on the website that are only, I forgot the term for it. Yeah, I forgot the term for it, but like skeuomorphism, for instance, was a big thing because and they took real world objects and made it into a 3D or 2D design kind of tradition, right? So, for instance, the save icon uses a CD, a floppy disk, right? And most people don't even know what a floppy disk nowadays is. And that was based on a real world object. Like, it was a physical object that you use to save things. That's why they use that object. But now you have to like, why are you using the floppy disk? Like, but it's still there because it has become something that is I don't know the term for it. I've heard the term, but I forget it. But I think you know what I'm saying. But it has become something that has become like natural, even though it's not actually natural. Like, why would you use a floppy disk on a digital website, right? Like, you're not physically saving anything. Same thing for a trash can. You have a trash can for delete and for trash and stuff like that, but there's no actual, like, you're not physically putting it into a trash can. But what if you did, right? So the reason why I want to bring this up is because, we start thinking about how our interactions work. Like when you delete something nowadays, that there's a lot of design principles in place of how to allow people to delete something. It's when you have to pick confirmation messages. So if you allow somebody to delete something, you know, you have to say, "Are you sure you want to delete this?" And then they say yes, and you're like, "Okay, it's deleted." But an even better interaction than that is like even when you delete it, it goes into like a recycle pile. Like I think that's basically what the Mac does, or yeah, Windows does it too. But it goes into like there's a file called trash, so you can go back into the trash and bring something out. And that's because maybe you accidentally threw something away. Maybe you might need it later or something like that. But the point is that like this reflects real life, because on the internet, like on the digital interface, they used to have, or bad designers make it so that when you delete something, it's instantly gone. They don't ask you any confirmation; it's just gone. You're like, oh no 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 no, right? I'm sure you've probably had the experience where you're on a website, you deleted something by accident and it's just gone. Like they didn't even ask you if you were sure you wanted to delete it, and you can't get it back. And so now you're just like, it's really messed up. And they kind of use that real life scenario of a real trash can, because in real life you throw a trash can, you throw something in the trash can, you can always pick it back up, unless you throw the entire trash can out and stuff like that. So when I'm thinking about it, when I'm thinking about virtual reality, I'm thinking about what interactions do we have in our daily lives that we can bring into the virtual world, and then what of those those reactions that we have virtualized can we bring back into the web design. Maybe you can go directly to the real world, into the typical 2D design, but I do virtual reality, so that's how I see it. So yeah. Whew. Probably gonna end it there. But yeah, this idea is really fascinating to me. I definitely want to play around with it more. So we'll see how this blog turns out. Probably going to make multiple blogs, because he gave some great insight that I should make sure it's short. Be like 5 to 7 paragraphs tops, and that's difficult for me. As you see, I like to go on. I like to go into detail and stuff like that. So I'm probably going to break it up into different ones, and that would be interesting to do. But yeah, let me know what you think. Have you used VR before? Is it do you see the connections between traditional design and designing for virtual reality? And what would you like to know about virtual reality? What would you like to know about designing in virtual reality and immersive spatial computing in general? But let me know what you think, and have a good day.